I need to tell you something I wish somebody had told me 30 years ago. You are destroying your pans with that steel wool. Every single time you scrub a burnt pan with it, you are doing permanent, invisible damage that adds up fast. I know because I did it for years and I had no idea. My mother-in-law, Opal, is 87 years old. She was born in 1939, right in the thick of the Depression. She has cooked on cast iron her entire life. She has never once touched a piece of steel wool in her kitchen. And her pans? They are in better shape than most pans I have seen in stores. There is a reason for that, and I am going to explain it to you today in plain terms. A few months back, I was talking with a woman named Doris. She has cleaned professionally for over 25 years. Homes, restaurants, commercial kitchens. She has seen every kind of cookware damage imaginable. When I told her I used steel wool on my stainless steel skillet, she stopped me mid-sentence. She said, "Honey, that's the worst thing you can put on a pan." I want to share what she told me because it changed how I clean every single pan in this house. If this kind of practical kitchen knowledge is useful to you, hit that subscribe button right now. I put out real information every week. No fluff, no selling you something, just what actually works. Let's start with what steel wool actually is, because most people have never thought about it. Steel wool is made of very fine steel fibers, drawn out and tangled together into a pad. Those fibers are hard. On the Rockwell hardness scale, steel wool sits somewhere around 30 to 40. That is not as hard as a drill bit, but it is plenty hard to scratch most cooking surfaces. And here's the thing, hardness is relative. A material scratches anything softer than itself. That is basic material science, and it matters a great deal in your kitchen. Now let's talk about your different pans, one at a time, because what steel wool does to a stainless steel pan is different from what it does to cast iron, and what it does to nonstick is in a category all its own. Start with stainless steel. Your stainless skillet or pot has a surface that sits in a similar hardness range to the steel wool itself. You might think that means they're evenly matched, that nothing bad would happen, but that is not how this works. When you scrub with steel wool, you are dragging sharp, irregular fiber edges across the pan surface at pressure. The result is microscopic scratches, thousands of them, running in every direction you move that pad. You cannot see these scratches with your naked eye. They are there anyway. Those scratches matter for two reasons. The first is food safety. The FDA and food science researchers have documented this clearly. Scratched stainless steel surfaces create microscopic pits and channels where bacteria can hide. Your standard dish soap and rinse water does not reach the bottoms of those channels. Biofilm develops. You wash the pan, it looks clean, but bacteria are surviving in the scratch networks you made with that steel wool. This is a documented food safety concern in commercial kitchen guidelines. Your pan looks fine and is harboring contamination. The second reason is sticking. That factory smooth surface on your stainless pan is part of how it functions. When you scratch it, you give food more surface area to grab onto. Your pan starts sticking in ways it never did before. You scrub harder to get it clean. You create more scratches. The cycle continues until the pan is so degraded you replace it. The steel wool that was supposed to save the pan ends up costing you the pan. Now let's talk about cast iron. And this one makes me genuinely upset because cast iron can last generations if you treat it right. Opal's cast iron skillet belonged to her mother. That pan is probably 80 years old. It cooks like a dream. The reason is the seasoning, and steel wool destroys seasoning. Seasoning on cast iron is not grease. People think it is grease, but that is not accurate. Seasoning is polymerized oil. When you heat oil on cast iron past its smoke point, the oil undergoes a chemical transformation. The fatty acid chains link together and form a polymer, a plastic-like layer that bonds to the iron. That layer is what makes cast iron non-stick. It is also what protects the iron from rust. Now here is the hardness comparison that matters. Polymerized oil, that seasoning layer, is significantly softer than steel. It is not even close. Steel wool at Rockwell 30 to 40 against a thin polymerized oil film. The steel wool wins every time. One pass with steel wool and you have lifted the seasoning you spent months building. You are back to bare iron. Now the pan will rust. Now it will stick. Now you have to start the seasoning process all over again. Opal never did any of this because she never touched steel wool. The pan thrived. Carbon steel pans work on exactly the same principle. They also build a seasoning layer through polymerized oil. They are lighter than cast iron, but just as sensitive to abrasive scrubbing. Steel wool on carbon steel is the same mistake as steel wool on cast iron. You are stripping the one layer that makes the pan perform. Non-stick pans, and I want to be careful here because I am not a fan of these for other reasons, are in the most vulnerable category of all. The coating on a non-stick pan is PTFE, which most people know by the brand name Teflon. PTFE is an extraordinarily soft material. Its whole purpose is to be slippery, and that slipperiness is a property of the material's softness. Steel wool on a non-stick pan is not a matter of gradual degradation. One use of steel wool can destroy the coating completely. You will see visible scratches immediately, and once that coating is scratched, you are now cooking on damaged PTFE that can flake into your food. That pan goes in the trash. One scrub with steel wool and a $40 pan is garbage. So now you understand why Doris stopped me mid-sentence. She has seen this damage in kitchen after kitchen. She has watched people ruin good cookware with the very tool they thought was saving it. The store wants you to keep buying. I want you to stop needing. Let me tell you what Doris actually uses and what I now use for every burnt pan situation. Because burnt pans are a real problem. Things get stuck. Things get scorched. You need a solution. The solution just is not steel wool. For stainless steel, the professional standard is Barkeeper's Friend. I want to explain what is actually in it, because knowing the chemistry helps you understand why it works. The active ingredient in Barkeeper's Friend is oxalic acid. Oxalic acid is a naturally occurring organic acid found in many plants, including rhubarb and spinach. It has a very specific chemical property that makes it useful for cleaning metal surfaces. When food burns on stainless steel, what you have is a mixture of things. Some of it is Maillard reaction products, the brown compounds that form when proteins and sugars react at high heat. Some of it is polymerized proteins, which have denatured and stuck to the surface. Some of it is oxidized fats, and some of it, especially on older pans, is iron oxide, rust spots and mineral deposits from water. Oxalic acid targets iron oxide directly. It binds to iron ions and pulls them off the surface in a process called chelation. The iron oxide dissolves into solution and washes away. No scrubbing required, no scratching. For the burnt food residue, the proteins and fats, Barkeeper's Friend also contains a very fine abrasive, but fine means fine. The particle size is carefully controlled to be small enough to clean without scratching. The oxalic acid does most of the work. The abrasive does the rest with far less violence than steel wool. Doris told me she has never needed anything harder than Barkeeper's Friend on stainless steel. Not once in 25 years. But let's say you do not have Barkeeper's Friend. Let's say you are working with what's in your pantry, which is how Opal has always worked. Baking soda is your tool. Baking soda and water mixed into a paste. And I want to explain why this works so you trust it. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. It is mildly alkaline, a pH of around 8.3. When you apply an alkaline substance to burnt fat and protein residue, something called saponification begins to happen. This is the same basic chemistry behind soap making. Alkaline solutions break down the ester bonds in fats, turning them into soap, water-soluble compounds that lift off the surface. The burnt protein residue also responds to alkaline conditions. The chemical bonds holding it to the pan surface weaken. The residue softens and releases. At the same time, baking soda is a very mild abrasive. The crystal particles are small and relatively soft compared to steel. They provide just enough mechanical action to help lift loosened residue. They do not scratch stainless steel. The combination, alkaline chemistry doing the heavy work, mild abrasion finishing the job, is genuinely effective on most burnt stainless situations. Here is Opal's method, and it is the simplest thing in the world. You fill the pot or pan with water. You add a few tablespoons of baking soda. You put it on the stove and bring it to a boil. Then you let it simmer for 10 to 15 minutes. What happens is this. The boiling alkaline water penetrates under the burnt residue. The steam and bubbling action physically lifts the edges of the burnt layer. The alkaline chemistry loosens the chemical bonds holding it to the surface. By the time you dump that water out, most of the burnt material has either dissolved or is sitting loose on the surface. A soft cloth wipes it away. Opal has done this her whole life. She called it giving the pot a bath. The documented mechanism here is real. Steam pressure and thermal cycling create micro-movement at the residue pan interface. The alkaline solution infiltrates the gaps. The residue lifts. This works even on badly scorched stainless. It does not scratch anything. It costs pennies. Now, cast iron requires a different approach entirely, and I cannot stress this enough. You do not use water and baking soda on cast iron the same way. You do not soak cast iron. You do not leave water in cast iron. Water is cast iron's enemy because bare iron rusts quickly. So when cast iron gets burnt food stuck in it, what do you use? Salt. Plain, coarse salt. Kosher salt or coarse sea salt works perfectly. This is a documented restoration method used by cast iron restorers and professional kitchen staff who cook on cast iron daily. You pour a generous amount of coarse salt into the still warm pan. Not hot, warm. You use a folded cloth or a stiff bristled brush and scrub the salt around. The salt acts as an abrasive, but here is why it is safe for seasoning. Salt is water soluble, and more importantly, its crystal structure is different from steel fiber edges. Salt crystals have flat faces and relatively blunt edges. They abrade gently. They lift burnt food without digging into and stripping the polymerized oil seasoning underneath. After you scrub with salt, you dump the salt out. It will be brown and dirty, which tells you it worked. Wipe the pan clean with a cloth. Then put it back on low heat for a minute to evaporate any moisture. Then put a tiny amount of oil on a cloth and wipe it around the interior. That is all the re-seasoning you need for a routine cleaning. Opal did this after every use. Her cast iron never needed restoration. Carbon steel gets the same treatment. Coarse salt scrub, wipe clean, light oil, done. Now let's talk about enameled cast iron, which is a different animal. Le Creuset, Staub, the enameled Dutch ovens and braziers. These have a glass-like enamel coating fired onto the iron. Enamel is harder than bare cast iron seasoning, but it is also brittle. Steel wool will absolutely scratch enamel. The scratches will be visible and permanent. So what do professional cleaners use on burnt enameled cast iron? Baking soda again, but used as a soak. You fill the pot with warm water and add several tablespoons of baking soda. You let it sit for 30 minutes to an hour. The alkaline soak does the same chemistry, loosening burnt residue through saponification and bond disruption. Then you empty it and use a soft nylon brush or a silicone scraper. Nothing abrasive at all. For stubborn spots, a paste of baking soda and a small amount of dish soap, applied and left for 15 minutes, then wiped. That is it. One important warning on enameled surfaces. Do not use acid. Do not use vinegar. Do not use Barkeeper's Friend, which contains oxalic acid. Acid will damage enamel over time. It creates micro-etching in the glass surface that dulls the finish and eventually compromises it. Enameled cast iron is alkaline clean only. This is documented in the care instructions for every major enamel cookware brand, but most people never read them. I want to come back to the chemistry of what burnt actually means, because understanding this helps you choose the right cleaner every time. When food burns onto a pan, it is not just charred food sitting there. The heat has caused chemical transformations. Proteins have denatured. Their molecular structure has unfolded and refolded in a tangled mess. Then they have polymerized, forming cross-linked chains that bond to the pan surface. Fats have oxidized, forming a range of compounds including aldehydes and shorter-chain fatty acids that stick aggressively to metal surfaces. Sugar components have undergone pyrolysis. They have broken down under extreme heat into complex carbon compounds. All of these products have one thing in common. They form strong adhesive bonds to metal surfaces, and those bonds are chemical in nature. The way to break chemical bonds is with chemistry, not with mechanical force. Mechanical force, like steel wool, does not break the chemical bonds. It tears the residue away by brute force, and in doing so, it also tears away whatever surface is beneath it. Chemistry, alkaline solutions, targeted acids, chelating agents, actually dissolves the bonds. The residue lifts. The surface underneath is untouched. This is why every professional cleaner Doris has trained over 25 years learns this principle first. She told me the number one mistake amateur cleaners make is reaching for abrasives when chemistry is the right answer. Steel wool feels satisfying because you can feel it doing something, but what it is doing is not what you want. Let's talk numbers for a moment because I think about money the way Opal taught me to. A decent stainless steel skillet runs between $30 and $80. A good cast iron skillet is $25 to $50. A box of baking soda costs under $2. Barkeeper's Friend powder is about $3. A canister of kosher salt is $2. If steel wool damage gradually degrades your pans, more sticking, harder to clean, eventually bacterial contamination concerns, and you replace those pans every few years instead of every few decades, you are spending 10 to 20 times more money over your lifetime. Opal has never bought a new pot in her adult life, not one. The pans she cooks on today were her mother's pans. The math is simple, but it goes beyond money. There is something deeply satisfying about maintaining tools properly and having them reward you for it. Opal's cast iron is a better cooking surface today than it was 50 years ago, because 50 years of proper seasoning has built up a patina that is practically non-stick. A pan that is cared for correctly improves with age. That is not true of a pan that has been scratched and damaged and replaced. There is no accumulated quality in a replacement pan. You start over from zero every time. I want to address one thing people always ask me. What about rust on cast iron? If you already have rust, if someone in your house washed the cast iron with soap and left it wet, or you inherited a rusty pan, can you use something more aggressive? Yes, but strategically. For rust removal on bare cast iron, you can use a paste of coarse salt and a cut lemon. The mild acid in the lemon juice reacts with the iron oxide, the rust, and begins dissolving it. The coarse salt provides the abrasion. This is gentle enough that it removes rust without significantly stripping old seasoning that is still intact. After the rust is gone, rinse quickly, dry immediately on the stove, and re-season with a thin oil coat. You use the acid for a specific job, rust removal, and then you stop. You do not soak in acid. You do not scrub repeatedly with acid. Targeted use for a specific problem, then back to normal maintenance. Never use acid on enamel. I will say it again. Never. Acid on enamel is cumulative damage. Each exposure etches slightly further. The surface clouds. The enamel weakens. your beautiful Dutch oven becomes a damaged pot that is harder to clean and potentially unsafe to cook in. Alkaline only for enamel, every time, without exception. If this video has been useful to you, I want to ask you something. There is probably someone in your life who is still using steel wool on their pans and has no idea about any of this. A neighbor, a grown child, a friend. Send them this video, genuinely, not because I need the views, though I appreciate every one of them, but because this information saves money, saves pans, and prevents real food safety issues. Knowledge like this used to get passed down in families like it was passed from Opal to me. That chain is broken in a lot of families now. We can rebuild it. Subscribe to this channel if you want more of this. I cover real kitchen knowledge, maintenance, technique, the why behind the how. No sponsored products, no gimmicks, just what works and why. That is what Opal taught me. That is what I am here to pass along. Let me leave you with what Doris told me at the very end of our conversation. She has cleaned professionally for 25 years. She has seen thousands of kitchens. I asked her what the single most destructive thing people do to their cookware was. She did not hesitate. She said steel wool on a pan that doesn't need it. Not a burnt pan, any pan, because most people reach for steel wool before they have even tried anything else. They skip the chemistry and go straight to the abrasive. Every time they do a little more damage. And then one day the pan is ruined and they do not know why. You know why now. You know what steel wool does at the surface level, the hardness, the scratching, the microscopic channels that become bacterial hiding spots in stainless, the seasoning stripping in cast iron, the coating destruction in non-stick. You know what to use instead. Baking soda paste and barkeeper's friend for stainless, coarse salt for cast iron and carbon steel, baking soda soak for enamel, the boiling water method for stubborn scorching. Simple, cheap, effective, and safe for your surfaces. Opal is 87 years old and she still cooks on the same pan her mother cooked on in the 1940s. That pan works better today than most new pans I have handled. That is what proper care looks like over a lifetime. That is what Opal calls just taking care of your things. I think she is right. I hope you do too. Take care of your kitchen. It will take care of you.